I'm Mark Moore, and I'm here with former State Senator Jim Holt. And there's been some very interesting developments in the Bryan King, Bob Ballinger runoff election for state Senate. It's a very rural district. And some of the things maybe Jim experienced when he was in his time in the Senate, and some things that in this race, they're wild experiences. And so we thought we'd just take a few minutes to talk about some of the things that have been said and put perspective on some of the things that have been said. One thing that is an issue in the race is an argument about who is an effective state senator and who is not. Now, Jim, sometimes you were accused of being ineffective, and kind of for the same reason Bryan is. I mean, history repeats itself, doesn't it? They said,
well, I was very ineffective.
That's why they wanted you gone so bad. You were just so ineffectively messing up their schemes.
Yeah, I know. I was never running as many bills as they were running, and it made them mad because, you know, the goal down there is whoever passes the most bills wins. So they would want me there usually just to say, yeah, we beat up him all the time because he doesn't get as much pass as we do.
Right. Because really isn't that what conservatism is passing a bunch of new laws, right? Isn't that our problem?
Yes, I remember there was a time I was being debated, and this one guy, it was in 06, and we were in a debate, and not to mention any names, it was a lieutenant governor's race. And the one guy says, well, I've passed all these bills and I get along down there in Little Rock. And so I get a lot of things accomplished, and I've passed all these bills, and Holt's passed like 1 or 2 bills. And then the next guy says, yeah, Holt's just not been effective down there. And they get to me, and I just kind of sit back and kind of grinned and said, well, let me ask you a question. How many of y'all feel like we don't have enough laws? Nobody moved. And I said, how many feels like we have too many laws? And they were just like raising their hands. And I said, my goal is to kind of defeat all the bad bills. And it doesn't make you popular down in Little Rock when you're telling other people's ideas, you don't like them, you know?
Yeah, exactly. That is the question. Is our problem that we have too few laws or too many? If our problem is that we have too few laws, then I guess being able to pass a bunch of bills is a good measure of effectiveness. But if our problem is that we have too many laws, and I would think that most conservative voters would agree with that, then sending a guy down there that passes a bunch of bills, that's not necessarily a good thing, especially when you consider, I mean, tell us, Jim, tell the voters right now, as far as being effective, what do they have to do to get a bunch of bills with their name on it passed?
Well, you have to play the game. You have to go down there. Sometimes it's like, I'll vote for yours if you vote for mine. I may not agree with it, and some of my people in my district may not agree with it, but if you can help me get mine passed, then I'll vote for yours. And that's how we have a lot of bad laws.
Okay, so you would say this system where I'll vote for your bill and I don't care whether it's that good or not. If you'll vote for my bill, if you don't care whether that's good or not, we get both more laws and worse laws than if you take this sort of, you and Bryan King had this mindset where you're going to evaluate each bill on its own. You want time to read it and consider it before you vote on it. You don't want them stacking 15 bills together and voting for them all at once. Right. And so I guess what you're saying is effective is making the laws that are passed, making sure those are good laws. The best way to do that is to not play that game and sacrifice not having your name on all these bills.
Yeah, that's absolutely right. I think Bryan King said to me that there was like over 20-something thousand bills that when he was in office. I don't want any more new laws. Now, if you're fixing something that's bad, of course, you know, you want to see something like that happen. For the most part, when you're in the Senate, they batch those bills together. And they did the same thing to me when I was running in 2006 for lieutenant governor. My Democrat opponent said, well, Holt's not for farmers, and Holt's not for children. He's not for education. He's not for minimum wage increase, and he's not for pay raises for teachers. And what they did is they batched all those bills together. In the Senate, for you to be able to vote against those, you have to pull one out. True story. First time I was in the Senate, they had our pay raise come up. I said, I don't know what to do. I want to vote for these other bills of the appropriations, but I don't want to vote for my pay raise. So I said, can I pull my pay raise out? And they said, yes, any senator can make a motion and it's automatically passed that you can pull a bill out and vote on it separately. Well, I voted against my pay raise. Well, guess where I was right after the vote was over that day in session? I was in the Senate Pro Tem, the majority leader and the minority leader's office, and they were reading me the riot act saying, you're a senator now, you made the rest of us look bad, and you've got to learn how to make the hard votes, and you have to vote for our pay raise. It's not that much anyway. And I was like, we're taxing the people more. Why am I going to vote myself a pay raise? And I said, nobody in America gets to vote themselves a pay raise but us. I said, we could put a constitutional amendment where they vote us in if they think we're doing a good job.
They did that. They had a constitutional amendment in where they took it out of their hands and put it into a board they appoint that gives them their pay raises now. Instead of,
yeah, where they have to vote on, they don't do it anymore. It automatically happens.
exactly.
Yeah. And I was trying to get it to where the people voted on it. But the thing is I've watched Bryan King's voting record. And not only that, I have several people down in Little Rock, I think you do as well, that deal with him. And they said Bryan King is very ethical to deal with. He's like one of the most ethical guys down there as far as making sure things are done the right way. And he is about calling out corruption. And I've seen it over and over again. And people don't like that. I mean, you know, I used to say, turn on the lights and watch them scatter. You know, the roaches always scatter. And as soon as you turn the lights on something, they don't really address if that's true or not. What they do is they just start attacking you. Oh, well, he's only voted 27% of the time. Well, during that session, he had hip replacement surgery. And also I've been there where the first session I was in, I didn't vote a whole lot of the time either, because there was things I was working on. And plus I didn't have a whole bunch of people to help me read all the bills. They literally throw so many bills at you so quickly, and people just, the lobbyists come up and tell you, oh, just vote for this bill. It's a good one. And I had one guy do that, and they were raising the fees for used car dealers like 250%. And if you had a satellite dealership, it was 500%. And they were trying to pass it off as it was non-controversial. And I saw it after it had passed out of committee, and I tried to withdraw it back to the committee, and I was greatly reprimanded. So yeah, it's a clique down there. You have to go along to get along. And if you don't, they do everything they can to kick you out.
So, I mean, I think a lot of us can sympathize with someone who missed a lot of work for health reasons. They had hip replacement. Take that into account. Also, the percentages are deceiving, because from what you're telling me, they'll stack 15 bills together and vote on them all at once. And you just missed a vote on 15 bills.
Yeah, 40 or 50 bills.
40 or 50 bills
at a time.
So, if and they rush them through, obviously 20,000 pieces of legislation, they're passing too many laws. They're not.
Well, and every time you pass that and pass both of those, that's actually signing the signature. You're writing a check. See, people like to blame the governor or the president for the problems we're having with our debt. That's a falsehood. The people who write the checks are the legislature. And when it passes, those appropriations pass the House and the Senate. That's why the spending happens. It's not the governor. The governor or the president only suggests or recommends a budget. It's up to us to approve it.
So if there's something in those bills that is bad, and you voted for it because you trusted somebody, or all your gang was telling you, hey, here's a good bill, and then there's something bad in it, you could be held to account for that the next election. And if you don't vote for the stack of 40 or 50 bills because you haven't had time to read them, and there's something good in it, then they come around and say, oh, you didn't vote for this good thing.
Exactly.
That's outrageous.
It's a game. They play that on purpose, because if you don't do something, or you do something against the flow or against the herd, they want you out because it makes them look bad. And here's the thing that just blows my mind, Mark, is that a lot of people love that about Trump. He tries to go in and drain the swamp and call it like it is. And that's what I like about Bryan King. He's going in trying to do the same thing. And for some reason, we have a cognitive dissonance, or we have a disconnect in our head in our local area. I mean, if you talk to people and say, oh yeah, we got to get rid of all these politicians, I'm tired of all of them. Okay, let's start with yours. Oh no, mine doesn't do stuff like that. We got to be vigilant to make sure that how is our politician, how is our person that representing us, how are they voting? Who are their associations with? I've had people come up and tell me behind the scenes, like, hey, we want to help your campaign, and we're going to send out stuff for you. You know that they're going to do that most generally. I mean, it's not just like a surprise, you know, that happens. And when you have a lot of lobby money coming into you, it's because you've played the corporate game down in Little Rock. That's how it works.
If they keep giving, yes, I can see where they can give maybe the first time, and then they find out they don't get anything for their money, then they don't give the second time. But yeah, exactly. If it's a pattern. But
one thing I'd like to add in here is, I remember, Mark, that you and I had talked about this before, and I like gridlock, because if there's, for the most part, gridlock, and that may sound like a bad thing, but for the most part, the less laws or the less bills they pass on us, the more happy I am. And so if they would vote, less or not try to present as many bills, I think I would be happier.
If you are a small government conservative, you should love gridlock. If you are a person that's trying to get a bunch of your corporate buddies special favors, or if you're a socialist trying to strip the middle class to provide more welfare, right, you should hate gridlock. Either one of those two extremes hates gridlock. If you're a socialist trying to spend more money, if you're a stooge for the big corporations, trying to steal more money for them. If you're in the middle, what gridlock means is nothing gets done unless it's really popular.
Right.
That does not sound so bad to me.
Right. And
You
then
know?
another thing is, if you're a socialist, I mean, you think about the very essence of socialism, it's always trying to make everything fair and balanced and equal, which every one of us have different lives and different things going on. There's no way. I mean, that it's all relative. It's a joke. So what people do is they try to pass more laws to make sure that it's equal. And we have a big mess. I mean, that's where the basis of all these laws come from, is just everybody's got to be equal and fair. And unfortunately, that's not life. They're trying to have heaven here on earth, and I'm looking forward to heaven up there. But
I'm looking forward to heaven up there. And I like to say that government cannot give you paradise on earth, but it can take all your money and freedom trying.
absolutely.
So is the way I like to put it. But on the other hand, there's some big corporations that have found out that they can get into the public treasury too and write laws that are unfair to consumers. And basically, Main Street is hurting while Wall Street has been doing great. Now Wall Street is starting to collapse, because if Main Street's hurting, eventually it's going to catch up to Wall Street. So, I think we have some business leaders that need to re-examine the way they're doing things. Of the two candidates, I think Bryan King is the one that'll tell them that straight up. And Bob never will, is my opinion.
Well, one thing that the Bible talks about that you don't hear much about is it says when you make a judgment, you do all things without partiality.
Without partiality.
And it's in James, it's in Psalms, it's in Proverbs 24, 23, I think, to 26. Anyway,
it's in the law of Moses.
Yes, it's in the law of Moses as well. And that's where a lot of our laws were based on when we started this country. The basis of we do all things without partiality. And when you go down there and you're favoring the people that are going to give you the campaign contributions, or these big corporations, and you trust, I'm going to tell you, it's nicer than any church down there. I had a guy come up to me my first session, put his arm around me, and he's like, "We've been watching you," after I kind of defeated something that was there. He goes, "We've been watching you, son. We think you're going to be a pretty good governor one day." He put his arm around me. I'm like, "Really?" And this is my first session, right? And he said, "So how are you going to be on this nursing home bed tax bill?" And I'm like, "I'm not going to be for that one." And he goes, "Well, your constituents would be for it." And I'm like, "Yeah, I'm not gonna be voting for a nursing home bed tax." He goes, "Well, if you don't," he goes, "I can guarantee you 2 or 3 primary opponents, or 1 or 2 primary opponents your next election." Sure enough, I got 2 primary opponents the next election.
You never had trouble drawing primary opponents. I remember that. I think you did a good job of showing people that sometimes this percentage of voting record thing, it's both a scam and a trap. It's a scam because whoever's really running things, the insiders, they present you a stack of bills. You don't have time to read them. Then they expect you to vote on them. They never call out their own guys. But if you skip a vote and there's something good in the bill, they accuse you of being against the thing that was good. And if you voted on it because you didn't know it was on the bill and there's something bad in there, they stick you for being bad. So you can't win. The only way you can win is explain the truth to the voters and hope they get it, that the process down there is flawed. We need to send someone to Little Rock who will challenge the process.
Mm-hmm.
And the voters have to decide, is that Bob Ballinger or is that Bryan King? So Jim, I think we've already touched on it about the different aspects of being an effective legislator and how the definition of effective legislator should not be the one that passes the most bills or even necessarily the one that casts the most votes. If the process by which the voting is done is flawed, if you're not sure what is in a bill and that the system wants to rush through a bunch of bills because special interests have bought everybody off, is the best legislature the one that casts the most of those votes? Or is it the one who says this process is a farce and needs to be changed?
Right.
So I think we covered that one pretty well. But
another point about that is people think that the legislator actually writes the bill. No, that's not how it works. The special interest writes the bill. They have their attorneys write it, and they get somebody that they think is going along to get along that everybody likes. It's like a popularity contest down there. And so the special interest gets paid a lot of money, or they make sure they fund the next campaign. They get a guy that they think is effective, that's passing legislation. They write the bill. The legislator doesn't even write it. Sometimes the bills are this thick, and they don't even know what's in it. They have a relationship. "Oh yeah, I trust you." And then they run the bill.
Yeah, they don't even know. They're telling you it's a good bill. They didn't write the bill. The bill got handed to them by special interest group. Was the special interest group really thinking, "Hey, this will really benefit this constituents in this guy's district"?
Exactly.
Yeah. So, I mean, we got to really.
We're writing this for the people.
Yeah, I'm just going to write a bill. Has nothing to do with my own interests. I'm just going to write this bill because I think the people need this, and
people need it.
Hand it to Joe Backslapper, And,
Exactly.
you know, he'll get all his buddies to vote for it based on he'll vote for their stuff if they do. And somehow people have the crazy idea that that's an effective legislator. It's a clown show to me. I mean, I'm sorry. We need a better way. We need people who are more discriminating.
Exactly.
Discrimination is not always bad. If you're discriminating against, I'm not going to put new laws on people until I know what's in the law and I know it's good.
Exactly. And a lot of
not play games with a process that won't do that.
When people really understand how that process works, it's so maddening. You go down there and you're fighting in Little Rock 134 there's 135 total legislators, and you're fighting that with every one of them. And the corporate interests are vast, and it's like trying to drink water out of a fire hydrant.
And what gets me is the egos of these legislators. They get upset. Oh, you didn't vote for my bill, Jim. I mean, did you ever want to look at them and say, it wasn't your bill, dude? That lobbyist just handed you that piece of paper.
Exactly. Yeah, but you're cutting down my chance. The more people that vote for it, I get a bonus, you know?
Yeah, right. Just, you know, you just want your name on it. It's not your bill. It doesn't help your constituents. So why are you mad at me for not voting for that piece of garbage? Right. I should have gone fishing.
I always told him I was down there for the people. And that's what I like about Bryan King is I know he is trying to be fair on both sides. I mean, he really looks at everything and says, what's best for everyone? You know?
Right. It's like, he wants to be fair. I really don't think he's anti-corporation. You know, when you say populist, he is kind of really populist, but he just wanted to be fair. But the people right now that have the system turned to their advantage, they don't want fair.
That's right.
So that's a problem. The other aspect of the situation, Jim, as far as being an effective legislator, is there has been a lot of corruption in the Arkansas legislature. There's been a lot of corruption in the state Senate. The people of Arkansas are sending people down there, and the FBI is taking them out. I think at one point, 10% of the state Senate was under indictment. And there's no indication that they've gotten them all. They got some high profile ones that really got sloppy. But it's a shame that our candidate selection process is so flawed and that our watchdog process is so flawed that the FBI has to do what the voters should do and what the party should do. Would you talk a little bit about the importance of being willing to be that whistleblower and what the cost is?
Man, that's a hard one. You know, Bobby and I have had to take some recent stands against our former best friends and in that federal case. And it's not something that you want to do, but then you always got to think about the other side. You know, you have to think about the victims. When it comes to the legislative process, the victims are always the people. It's always our freedoms that are taken away or our money. And the taxpayer money, it's like it's so nebulous down there. You know, it's really easy to spend other people's money, and we shouldn't think that way. I guess the thing that really concerns me is that both sides, the Republicans and the Democrats, if they don't police their own and they always just take up for this is my side, this is my guy, the other side always says, well, look at you, you're a bunch of hypocrites. I think everybody would find it really refreshing to say, yeah, this is the Republican Party. They did this wrong. We need to call them out and say, we're not going to tolerate this in our party. I think if that happened, you would see so many more people that are riding the fence, that, you know, that 20% in the middle, you know, like we talked about, you know, the extremes determine the middle, but that 20% in the middle, I think they would be going, man, this party has integrity. And if they do something wrong and they find out, we're going to call them out. If we don't do that, I don't see how America will ever survive. And I think that's the problem that we're in right now, is that when a person does blow the whistle, they're shamed to where they have to be quiet. It's like a perception game. It's like a dog and pony show or smoke and mirrors that, oh, well, you know, Bryan King's pointing the finger at some of these things that's happened, like the Medicaid money and some of those things and the ties to that. And he points that out. And then the other side has this big lobby and corporate interest behind him, send out all these mailers and say, oh, look, he's only voted 27% of the time. But that's even misleading, because in all his years down there, that is absolutely impossible. That was only for a small portion of time, like I think in 2017. So if we don't reward the whistleblower by saying thank you for calling that out, then all you're doing is setting up the entire system to continue to decline. And the good old boy network is going to continue down there, because nobody is going to, I mean, look at Trump. This guy had $11 billion, and look what the media did to him. You know, when he blows the whistle and tries to drain the swamp, they still got him out of there until people start realizing this guy blew the whistle. He needs to be back down there more, because he's looking out for everybody.
And in his own party, he was in chair of the budget committee. And he started asking some uncomfortable questions about where the money went on Obamacare and called it out as a scam. and they took him out as chair of the budget committee, not
Yeah.
because he was doing a bad job of looking out for the public's interest, because he was doing a good job of looking out for the public interest and
You're
wanted
asking
to
too
know
many
where the money went.
questions.
Yeah, asked the wrong questions. So they just put him in a position where he couldn't ask those questions as well. So I do think, there's a toxic situation there within, and of course, in the Democrat Party, but it's in the Republican Party too. They have this mindset where they don't want to police their own. It's just like the mafia. You don't rat out your brothers when they do something wrong because they're your club. And right and wrong is defined by, if it's good for my club, it's good for, but it's not. So, that guarantees corruption. It guarantees corruption. The only way to fix it is to send someone like Bryan King, who is willing to, it doesn't matter who does the wrong thing, Republican or Democrat or independent, he doesn't care. He'll call them out. As I look across the political landscape in Arkansas, I can't see the big cities constituents. I don't know they're going to get this. I don't know it's needed. This state is crying out. There's a great need for someone who will be an honest whistleblower in the legislature. Mm-hmm. But I think it's going to be up to the rural folks to send that person there. I don't think the big city people are going to do it. And so to me, this race is the prime chance. What a waste of opportunity. So now Ballinger, Senator Ballinger sent out a video recently. In his mind, he was making the case of why he would be better than Bryan King.
But I don't want that. I don't want Democrats choosing our nominee. And so if you don't want Democrats choosing your nominee, get out there and let people know there is a Republican nominee who stands on Republican values, who's proven that he stands on Republican values, and has demonstrated it by his record. And there's one that they say, you know what, we'll take him because we know he will do nothing. He will accomplish nothing in Little Rock, and he also does a good job at picking on other Republicans, and so we'll choose him, and they're overwhelmingly choosing him. So that's the reality. I think we need to get out there and we need to share it. It's happening in a lot of places, right? So it's all over the place that in Arkansas, Republicans, there's an organization that actually took a vote yesterday to decide whether to support Bryan or not. It's called Common Ground. Common Ground is doing everything they can to try to move the party over to the left. And they're out there telling people that the Democrats need to go vote in Republican primaries. And they took a vote yesterday. I don't know what the results were of whether to support Bryan or not. But the fact that they're considering it, and what their comment was, is we know that Bob is crazy, but Bob is crazy and ineffective. Bryan is crazy and ineffective. So that's the reason why they're looking at and maybe putting some money into Bryan's campaign.
They got it half right. I think they have the same flawed idea about what is effective that is shared by many people, because so-called common ground is, they have their own big business agenda too. Just by what he said there, Bryan King will pick on other Republicans. Well, he won't pick on them just to be picking on them. If they're doing something unethical, he's going to police his own. He's going to be impartial. And I'm telling you, both parties are going to lose all credibility in the minds of the voters if somebody within their own ranks doesn't do this.
Exactly. Well, if you think about it, though, he's really he's telling how powerful, Bryan really is, because he's only one out of 135, but everybody's afraid that he's going to pick on him.
There's a Thomas Sowell quote. It says, it's amazing, something I'm paraphrasing, it's amazing the consternation that can be caused by one honest man walking into a room full of crooks. And
that's a great quote.
But and speaking of honesty there, the truth is, Bob was insinuating that Common Ground is supporting Bryan. They weren't supporting him all this time. They actually ran an attack mailer against him.
Okay, so yesterday I sent this to you, this mailer, because a person in the district who's a friend of mine sent me this mailer, and he was thinking, oh, well, this is kind of very negative. And he was talking about this, and we were talking about Common Ground, and Bob just mentioned the Common Ground, and you sent it to me. And even Bryan King said, this is not from Bryan. And then I looked at Bob Ballinger's Facebook, and he said, this is not our mailer. We didn't send this out. But can you tell us who it was that sent it out? Because he just said that Common Ground was voting on if they were going to support Bryan. And he said, even if they don't, for them to even consider supporting Bryan should tell you something.
Well, I would say that they didn't support him. That's why there was another candidate in the race that was eliminated and is not in the runoff, and that's who they were for. But for him to do well, he had to take votes from Bryan. So they had their guy, Rhett Hatcher in Little Rock, who's helping with a lot of their candidates, according to Bryan, send out an attack mailer. And then now Common Ground wanted to meet with Bryan King. Well, he told him, no, I'm not going to meet with you. So that, they kind of had to hang their head once their horse was knocked out of the race by Bryan. Then they wanted to make nice to Bryan. And Bryan's like, no, I'm not going to do that. So I think it's really, I don't like the way Bob is dropping those insinuations as if Common Core is backing Bryan King. It didn't matter. He refused to meet with them. And after they ran a dishonest mailer against him in the race before the first primary, I don't blame him. They can't do that. They can't tell untruths about you. And then a month later, oh, let's pretend like we're friends now.
So who did, and now Rhett Hatcher, from what I'm hearing you say, tell me if I'm correct, is that Rhett Hatcher is the guy that's actually running Common Ground?
Not Common Ground. He's got this other little shell group that has a different name, but he's basically, Common Ground is backing some candidates and he's helping in their campaigns. So he's like a consultant. Basically, Common Ground is providing consulting services for a bunch of candidates that they like. And they're also doing mailers through this little shell group. And the name of it was in the flyer. I forget what the flyer was. So an anti-establishment candidate has to do his own dirty work and say bad things about the other candidate. So it looks like, oh, gee, you're playing so dirty. It's because they hire shell groups and they just raise up another fake organization to do the attacking. And then their candidate can say, oh, gee, I'm having a clean race. Yes, that's because you had big money backing you, and the big money hired a hatchet man.
Right here, the guy's name is Rhett Hatcher. And
what's the name of the group?
The group is Committee for Lower Taxes.
Committee for Lower Taxes.
That sounds good.
I wonder how many people are on that committee.
I don't know, but that's a 2. I don't.
What Bryan King is not a tax guy. He wants lower taxes. So why are they against Bryan King if they're for low taxes? That one that just sounds like a generic throwaway name that a front group can use. But it's not the real people that are warming up to Bryan King as conduit for action, in my opinion. Now we'll see what comes of that, but that is the group that's trying to pull the Republican Party to the right, in my opinion.
Absolutely.
Common Ground is trying to pull them to the corporate, I will call it the corporate left. I think the reality is 180 out from what Senator Ballinger suggested in his video. The part that would raise the red flag to me, the alarm went off. It said, oh, the Democrats think he'll pick on other Republicans. Well, I'm an independent. I'm not a Democrat. I'm too conservative for the Republican Party, today's Republican Party. I'm too populist for today's Republican Party.
I think we always have been.
I always have been. Yeah. Well, I wasn't. No, in my younger days, when I thought the Republican Party was something different than what it's turned out to be, I was with you. I was county vice chairman in Union County, and I ran as a Republican candidate. I like
the
Reagan
Republican
said,
parties ran away from us for sure. Yeah.
Exactly. Anybody, even a Republican who wants the Republican Party to have integrity, should want a Republican who will call out other Republicans when they do the wrong thing.
Absolutely.
You can't have this omerta. The mafia has this code of silence where you don't tell on your fellow mobster when they do something wrong. And that's really inappropriate, I think, for a public servant and for public office.
They're supposed to be there representing our interests, not everybody down in Little Rock. They used to call it, we're all incumbent-crats. We like each other. And as long as you don't rock the boat, we'll make sure you get elected. It doesn't matter if you're Democrat or Republican. And seriously, they've actually said that to me. When they redistrict and draw the lines, if you play nice, we'll put you in the district where you're almost guaranteed you're going to get reelected. I mean, they actually say that when you're down there.
Well, and we got the team player thing, but I think a man has to determine who his team is. Is it your constituents in the district, or is it the party in Little Rock that is funded by corporations that really half their assets are outside of America even?
Exactly.
So it's not that you won't be a team player, it's who your team is, I think, that's most important. The several issues we talked about today that I think is very important, not just for this race, but every voter needs to understand this, because these same things, some of these same things were used against you, some of these same tricks. And they will be used against the next guy or gal and the one after that.
And if the public doesn't wake up to these shenanigans and this smoke and mirrors and perception casting the way they do it, the country's never going to get better. It just won't.